On Halloween of 2023, the day after a 26-14 loss to the Detroit Lions, Mark Davis, the owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, finally decided that he'd had enough. After handing out a 6-year contract, paying $10 million annually to head coach Josh McDaniels only the year prior, Davis made the decision to fire him. It was a long time coming. Despite trading for one of the best wide receivers in the game in Devontae Adams, and signing edge rusher Chandler Jones coming off a huge year, the Raiders ended 2022 with a disappointing 6-11 record, becoming the first team in NFL history to lose 5 or more times in a season while leading by double digits in the second half. During this first season with the Raiders, McDaniels was already on the hot seat, as reports came out that the Raiders wanted to fire him, but legitimately couldn't because they didn't have the cash available to do so. Even though these circumstances were less than ideal, it gave McDaniels the opportunity to save his job in 2023. But only 8 games into the season, after starting 3-5, Davis, having saved up money from giving himself his haircuts, scraped together the cash needed to fire McDaniels, deciding that he couldn't keep him there for even one more second, nonetheless the end of the year. With the firing in the books, this would mark the second time in only 3 seasons that the Raiders had lost a coach mid-season. In 2021, John Gruden resigned after a 3-2 start for off-field reasons, leading to the appointment of interim coach Rich Bisaccia. Bisaccia actually did well, bringing the team to a 7-5 record and a playoff berth, making the Raiders the only team in the Super Bowl era to make the playoffs after a mid-season coaching change. That offseason, Raiders players begged Mark Davis to keep Bisaccia as the permanent head coach, but the Raiders went a different direction, hiring Josh McDaniels. As we know, that story ended with yet another mid-season firing and yet another interim coach, Antonio Pierce, who was slated to coach the very next game against the team he played most of his career for, the New York Giants. This is where my intrigue in the subject began, because the game after a coach is fired mid-season is often referred to as the witch's dead game. It's used to describe the situation where, after firing their coach mid-season, a team is injected with new life and plays significantly better than they had been. Bettors use it to predict upsets, fans use it to justify optimism, and media outlets just use it for an easy story. But is it true? Do teams actually improve the very second their coach leaves? There are a lot of anecdotal examples. The week after the Lions fired Matt Patricia in 2020, Darrell Bevell led them to a 34-30 win over the Chicago Bears, who Patricia was 0-5 against in his tenure there. In that same year, Romeo Crennel led the Texans to a 30-14 win against the Jaguars in his first game as the interim, filling in for Bill O'Brien. 2 years later, in 2022, Jeff Saturday's first game as the Colts' interim head coach resulted in a 25-20 win over the Raiders, who were coached by Josh McDaniels. And once McDaniels was fired this past season, Antonio Pierce won his witch's dead game, putting a 30-6 shellacking on the Giants. But do the statistics actually back up this phenomenon? Let's take a look. In the Super Bowl era, there have been 97 coaches who were replaced mid-season, whether that be by firing or resignation or whatever. Ones who eventually came back were not counted. For example, Chuck Pagano, who was dealing with cancer mid-season and was replaced by Bruce Arians. Otherwise, in the games coached by these 97 coaches, in the season they were fired, their respective teams averaged 16.2 points per game and 24.8 points allowed per game. With those 97 coaches replaced mid-season, that creates 97 separate witch's dead game opportunities. 48 of these games have been played at home and 49 on the road, and the average witch's dead game opponent ended their season with a win percentage of 0.501, which would be about the equivalent of a 2023 record of 8-9. So, with about an equal chance of playing at home or on the road, and on average playing against a mid-tier team, was there any difference? Looking at all 97 games, we can see that the teams really did improve immediately in terms of points scored and points allowed. As in these 97 games, the witch's dead teams averaged 17.4 points per game, a 1.2 points per game increase, and allowed an average of 24 points, a decrease of 0.8 points allowed per game. But this is only relative success. Just because Deuce Vaughn is taller than a preschooler doesn't mean he's tall. It just means he's taller than something else. Sorry Deuce, I do love you though. In that same way, just because you're better than a coach who was fired mid-season, that doesn't mean you're good. Generally, success is measured by wins, and there really aren't many of those to go around in the Which is Dead game. In those 97 games, the teams led by their new interim coaches have gone 34-63, a win percentage of .350. In these games, they were outscored 2,324 to 1,690, an average margin of defeat of about 6.6 points. This is an improvement of the average margin of defeat under the fired coaches, who lost on average by 8.6 points per game, but again, that's relative. Despite the hype about the Which is Dead game, it really only seems that the bettors are sharp here, because it really only bears on the team's ability to cover the point spread, not their ability to win. And this makes sense. The personnel is all the same. Many of the times the interim coach doesn't really have a significant enough amount of time to make any real changes, and the morale in the locker room is likely not in a great spot due to the losing season and just having the head coach fired, depending on whether they liked him or not. So, whether the Which is Dead game is real actually kind of depends on how you define it. If you're saying that it describes a scenario in which a team gets an immediate boost, making them better than they were under the fired coach, then the stats generally kind of back that up, but it doesn't really go any further than that, so it's kind of subjective. Maybe the Which is Dead game is the friends we made along the way. But to state the obvious, the season isn't only one game long. There's usually a rest of the season to play out after the Which is Dead game. And that's the real juicy question. How does the team do the rest of the year? Well, in this scenario, it's important to define what success is. As an NFL fan, you may want a mid-season coaching change to lead to an improved team. For NFL franchises, the goal may just be to mitigate the damage and get the coach out of the building and start looking towards the next year. Immediate success may actually hurt the team. By winning, the interim coach makes their draft pick worse, making it more difficult for them to bring in better talent for the next head coach, if it doesn't happen to be them. But for the purposes of this exercise, let's just assume that, when a coach is fired mid-season, the teams actually do it for the purpose of giving themselves the best chance to win the rest of their games in that season. Coaches fired mid-season had a record of 215, 628, and 6, a win percentage of .253. On offense, the fired coaches had an average EPA of -4.58, scored 16.2 points per game, and gained an average of 292 yards per game. On defense, these coaches had a defensive EPA of -2.68, allowed 24.8 points per game, and allowed an average of 340.7 yards per game. As a quick note, the EPA numbers are not wholly accurate because EPA didn't exist until at least 1994. Maybe slightly before then, but there are no EPA numbers for 47 of the 97 teams on this list. You know what? I'm gonna leave that voice crack in there, and that'll prove to you that this video was not made by AI. On that same point, I don't know anything about coding or scraping websites for data, so it took me forever, painstakingly gathering all the numbers for this. So I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. With that out of the way, let's discuss the interim coaches. If we include all interim coaches, we see significant improvement over the course of the season. With a record of 218, 436, and 2, the interim coaches increased the win percentage of their teams to 0.332. On offense, teams with interim coaches averaged 18 points per game, 297 yards per game, and an offensive EPA of -3.62, all improvements over the prior coaches. On defense, teams with interim coaches allowed 24 points per game, 339 yards per game, and had a defensive EPA of -1.57. Also all improvements. So what is our conclusion here? Interim coaches had a better win percentage of 0.07, and on a per game basis, interim coaches brought their teams to score 1.8 more points, allow 0.8 less points, gain 5 more yards, allow around 2 less yards, increase the team's offensive EPA by almost a full point, and improve the team's defensive EPA by 1.11 points. But that's probably not the best representation of the average interim coach. For example, we have Mike Holovac, the interim coach for the 1976 New York Jets, who stepped in for Lou Holtz to coach the very last game of the season for a 3-10 Jets team. This game would end in a 42-3 blowout loss to the Bengals, who finished that season 10-4. One game is just way too small of a sample size, and even just from a human perspective, you'd expect that a team is not really going to make any substantive changes where an interim coach knows they're only stepping in for the last game of the season, and many of the players on the team know it's their last game on a shitty team. You'd kind of expect the same logic to apply as many as 4 games out, and maybe even more. But in the interest of this exercise, let's look at only interim coaches who coached at least 5 games. There are 67 such coaches, and if we input their data, we can see similar results. In this scenario, we see that the interim coaches' teams actually allowed more yards and gained less yards on average, but they had a better win percentage, EPA, and more points per game, and allowed less points per game. So what these surface level stats tell us is that in general, firing a coach mid-season does give your team a better chance to win relative to retaining the head coach if we assume the head coach retains their same level of performance throughout the rest of the season. But there are a lot of other factors that play into this type of analysis. What about how far into the season the head coach is fired? Maybe an interim is more likely to turn the team into a successful one if he just gets a little bit more time. So let's look at interim coaches by the number of games coached. This chart looks hella confusing, I know, but it makes sense. In the middle section are all the stats for the coaches, depending on how many games they coached. Then on the sides, it ranks each individual category. The second to last column gives the team's average rank in all of the stats, and the last column then ranks the average ranks to see which team is the most well-rounded. Still hella confusing? Maybe, but I'll tell you what you gotta know. Teams have the best chance of boosting their team's performance when they fire their coach around mid-season or so, giving their interim coach 8 games. However, if we just look at pure win percentage, which doesn't really require all that ranking nonsense, the team that performs the best are teams led by interim coaches with only 3 games under their belt. If you're a statistics major, you're probably fuming, and I understand why. There are a lot of issues with this type of analysis. These are only surface level stats, and they don't consider a lot of the context, and a lot of these sample sizes are very small. In terms of context, there are tons of issues with this exercise. Many of these comparisons don't consider player injuries that could have factored into team performance, the actual skill of the interim coach, the circumstances surrounding the coach's firing, the overall strength of the roster talent on the team, and the strength of their opponents. There's also that whole selection bias issue, in that head coaches who are fired midseason are the ones who are not going to be too good. Otherwise, the team would just keep them around. So you can't just extrapolate this to firing any coach midseason. But if we throw all of that out the window, one can confidently say that if you're an NFL owner hoping to improve your team's chances of winning, and don't believe your head coach is getting the job done, you may slightly increase your team's chance of winning or not getting blown out in every game by firing your head coach rather than sticking with him, especially if you fire him in week 3 or week 8. Okay, I guess that was pretty pointless. But even if the results are disappointing, you don't learn something new until you actually look into it. And this was something I was pretty curious about. So let's just appreciate the journey together. I'm going to quickfire some interesting things about in-season coaching changes that I learned while doing the research. In the Super Bowl era, the teams who have had the most in-season coaching changes are the Falcons and the Chargers, each firing a coach mid-season 7 times, and both going 1-6 in their Which is Dead games. 3 teams have never fired a head coach mid-season, depending upon who you give the history of the Browns to. If we don't consider the old Cleveland Browns to be the Ravens have never fired a head coach mid-season, alongside the Bears and the Steelers. The Steelers did fire one head coach mid-season prior to the Super Bowl era in 1939 though. There have been 7 instances where a team won their Which is Dead game and then lost out the rest of the season. Of note are the 2022 Colts, led by Jeff Saturday, who shocked the world by beating the Raiders in his first week off the couch, and then allowed the Vikings to make the largest comeback in NFL history to fumble away his second potential win. Darrell Bevell also lost all 4 games after winning his first against the Bears. Of all the interim coaches, only 29 managed to go 500 or above. 27 coaches had a win percentage between 250 and 500, and 40 had below a 250 win percentage. That's kind of unfair because some of the coaches literally went 0-1 or 1-0. So if we consider only coaches with 5 or more games, 17 went 500 or above, 20 went between 250 and 500, and 30 went below 250. Some teams have gotten great opportunities by being able to play Which is Dead teams. The Vikings lead the league, having faced a Which is Dead team 7 times, but they only managed to go 4-3. The Falcons had 6 games against Which is Dead teams and went 2-4. The Colts, however, have played a Which is Dead team 5 times and they're undefeated in those games. There are some more things, but if you guys are interested, I may save them for a future video. For example, let me know if you guys would like to hear the stories of the best interim coaches. Otherwise, I'd love to know what you guys thought about this video. Obviously, this is a bit different than some of my other stuff, but it was something I was interested in looking into, and I figured I'd share the wealth. Speaking of sharing the wealth, I'll link the spreadsheet with all of the information about the in-season coaching changes, so nobody ever has to do this again. Well, until the next coach is fired in season, I guess. All of the information comes from Pro Football Reference, so shout out to them. But also, if it's wrong, don't blame me. Unless I put it in wrong. Anyways, I'd love to hear your thoughts below, as I'm really curious if I should make similar videos. But that's all I got for now, guys. Later.